Have you ever caught yourself in a conversation where something just didn't add up? That gut feeling that someone isn't being fully honest with you. Here's the thing, most people handle liars the wrong way. They either explode, shut down, or scramble to prove themselves. But there's a trick that flips the entire game. Liars hate it because it actually works. Liars survive on reaction. They want you emotional, they want you rattled, they want you chasing after their words. The moment you stop playing that game, they lose control. So when someone throws a lie your way, don't fight it. Don't explain yourself. Don't even accuse them. Instead, ask a calm question like, "That's interesting. Can you walk me through that again?" Now watch what happens. A liar hates repetition because every time they repeat it, they have to remember the last version of their story. And the more detail you calmly ask for, the faster their story crumbles. Here's the key: your tone. Neutral, controlled, almost curious, not angry, not sarcastic, just steady. Because anger gives them an excuse. Calm curiosity gives them none. The truth can handle questions. Lies can't. The more they talk, the heavier their story gets. And eventually, it collapses under its own weight. So remember this, you don't have to fight liars. You don't have to prove them wrong. You just let their own words do the work. That's why they hate this trick, because it works. Liars don't just throw out false words and hope they land. They survive off what happens after those words hit you. They rely on the spark, the shift, the way your body language changes when you hear something that doesn't feel right. It's not the lie alone that keeps them going. It's your reaction to it. They watch you closely, studying every twitch, every hesitation, every attempt you make to defend yourself. Because the moment you react, you hand them data, and liars feed on data. Think about it, a lie is always a risk. When someone lies, they know there's a chance you won't buy it. They know you might catch it, call it out, or challenge it. But what keeps their lie alive is not the strength of the story. It's how well they can adapt to you. They lie, then they wait. If you get defensive, they double down. If you look confused, they twist the story. If you get angry, they redirect the blame. That's how layers stay alive. They bend and shift like shadows, not because their story is strong, but because they're watching for cracks in you. Your reaction becomes their script. The moment you start explaining yourself, they know where to aim next. They'll say, "I never accused you of that," or "You're overreacting," because you gave them the chance. And when you raise your voice, they'll flip it and say, "See, this is exactly why I can't talk to you." That's how they turn your reaction into fuel. What looked like you standing up for yourself becomes the very thing that props up their story. And it's not just the words, it's the little things too. The way your eyes widen when something sounds off, the pause before you answer, the shift in your posture. Liars notice those details because they need them. A truth teller doesn't scan your every move, but a liar has to. They're fishing for signs of doubt, signals that tell them whether their lie is landing or if they need to adjust the angle. That's why they thrive when you react. They're not confident in their story, they're confident in their ability to play off of you. Ever notice how some lies get more elaborate the more you challenge them? That's not because the liar had the whole story built out from the beginning. It's because they're building it on the spot, brick by brick, depending on how you respond. If you question one detail, they'll patch it. If you look skeptical, they'll throw in another layer. The lie grows not because it's strong, but because you gave them room to grow it. They only know what to add once they've seen how you react. Liars aren't storytellers, they're reactors. And the energy that keeps their story alive doesn't come from within them, it comes from you. Without your reaction, they don't know what to adjust, where to push, or how to pivot. Your defensiveness becomes their opportunity, and your confusion becomes their cover. That's why they watch you so closely. Not because they trust the lie, but because they need to see if you do. Silence is uncomfortable for most people, but for a liar, it's suffocating. They throw their words out into the air expecting a return, expecting you to push back, defend yourself, or scramble to fill the space. When you don't, when you sit there in stillness, it forces them into a position they never prepared for. Because silence is not passive, it's pressure. It lingers, it stretches, and it makes them face their own words without your help to carry them along. Liars count on quick exchanges. They want a rhythm where you interrupt them, where you fill the gaps, where your voice keeps the conversation alive. Silence breaks that rhythm. It stops the momentum they rely on and leaves them stranded with nothing but their story. And here's the truth, lies don't live well in empty space. Lies need noise, they need chaos, they need your voice rising, your defenses stacking, your emotions spilling out, because all of that distracts from the cracks in what they just said. Take that away and suddenly the spotlight shines directly on their words and nothing else. Have you ever noticed how people start to talk more when things get quiet? They'll repeat themselves, add more details, or backtrack just to escape the tension. A liar does the same thing, only worse, because every second of silence makes them question whether you believe them. And instead of letting their words sit, they start patching and layering, trying to convince you with quantity instead of quality. The longer you say nothing, the more they panic, and panic pushes them into mistakes. They reveal too much, they contradict themselves, or they show frustration that doesn't fit the situation. All because you chose not to react. Silence isn't just about keeping your mouth shut, it's about composure. It's the raised eyebrow instead of the raised voice. It's the steady eye contact without the rush to explain yourself. It's the calm presence that says, I heard you, now let's see where you take this. That's why layers hate it. They want you to take the bait, to get tangled in their web, to play defense so they can stay on offense. Silence flips the field. It forces them to do the work, to carry the weight of their own story without your help. And most liars aren't strong enough for that. Silence also exposes intention. A truthful person doesn't crumble under quiet. If someone's telling the truth, they'll sit in that silence with you because they don't have to invent anything more. Their words can stand still. A liar can't. They feel the stillness pressing against them, and the urge to fill it becomes unbearable. They'll rush to add another explanation, another excuse, another justification. And the faster they talk, the clearer it becomes that the silence is not empty. It's doing the work for you. The most powerful move you can make against a liar isn't anger, it isn't exposing them, and it isn't trying to corner them with accusations. It's calm curiosity. That quiet, steady interest that doesn't give away whether you believe them or not, but makes them keep talking. Because curiosity doesn't look threatening. It doesn't look like confrontation. It looks like an open door, and a liar will almost always walk through it. But the beauty is, the more they walk, the deeper they go into a story they can't fully control. Calm curiosity works because it changes the entire energy of the interaction. Most people think lies should be fought with aggression, but that's what liars are prepared for. They're ready for anger. They're ready for accusations. They've already rehearsed their denials and built their counterattacks. What they're not ready for is someone who leans back, tilts their head slightly, and says in a steady tone, "That's interesting. Can you explain that a little more?" That single shift flips the spotlight. Instead of you scrambling to defend yourself, they're suddenly the one doing the explaining, and liars hate explaining. When you approach a lie with calm curiosity, you give them rope. Not in an obvious, confrontational way, but in a way that feels like genuine interest. You're not demanding, you're not accusing, you're simply asking them to take their own story a step further. And with every extra detail they add, the risk of contradiction grows. Lies are weak when stretched. They can sound convincing in short bursts, but they collapse when they're asked to stand up to questions. That's why calm curiosity is so effective. It makes the liar carry the weight of their own words without you doing a thing. The key is tone. It has to be neutral, almost casual, never sarcastic or sharp. Because sarcasm signals doubt, and doubt triggers defense. Calm curiosity, on the other hand, doesn't give away your stance. It keeps them guessing. Are you buying it? Are you suspicious? They can't tell, and that uncertainty eats away at their confidence. They'll start talking faster, repeating themselves, or throwing in extra details they didn't plan for. Every word they add becomes another piece of evidence they'll have to keep consistent later. And the more words they use, the more likely the lie will unravel. What makes this trick so powerful is how natural it feels on your side. You don't have to raise your voice or get dramatic. You don't even have to work hard to prove them wrong. You simply lean into curiosity the way you would if you were trying to understand something new. Walk me through that again. How did that happen? And then what? Each question sounds innocent, but each one adds weight to their story until it buckles under its own pressure. Calm curiosity doesn't fight the liar directly, it lets the liar fight themselves. A liar is comfortable in the fog. They survive in generalities, in vague statements that sound convincing because they don't say much at all. They lean on words like always, never, well, some people. Because those words don't tie them down, they keep things blurry enough that you can't grab hold of anything solid. But the moment you ask for specifics, the fog clears. Suddenly their story has to take shape, and that's where the cracks begin to show. Liars hate specifics because details are heavy. They're not easy to carry, and most of the time, the liar never built them in the first place. Think about how truth works. When someone is telling the truth, details come naturally. They can tell you what time it happened, where they were standing, who else was in the room, even the small, irrelevant things like the color of a chair or the sound of a car outside. They don't have to force those details. They're just there. A lie, on the other hand, isn't built on memory, it's built on invention. And invention struggles under the weight of specifics. That's why liars avoid them. They know the more detail they add, the more chances they create for their story to fall apart later. When you calmly start asking specific questions, you take away their safe zone. Questions like, what time was that? Or, who exactly was there? Or, how did that happen step by step? Sound harmless, but to a liar, they're landmines. Because specifics demand consistency, and consistency is what liars can't maintain. They might answer once, but the next time you ask, the details shift, they forget what they said before, they patch new answers over old ones. And each patch makes the story weaker, not stronger. What makes it so uncomfortable for them is that specifics trap them. They can't escape into generalizations anymore. They can't just shrug and say, "Oh, you know how it is," or "That's just the way it happened." Specifics pin them down. They take the story out of their control and place it under a microscope where every part of it can be examined. A liar doesn't want that. They want speed, distraction, emotion, anything but close inspection. That's why, when pressed for details, many liars either get defensive or start over, explaining, and both reactions give them away. There's also a hidden layer here. Specifics reveal intention. Someone telling the truth doesn't mind being asked for more detail. In fact, they welcome it because they know their story has nothing to hide. A liar, though, feels threatened by it. They see specifics as traps, not because the questions are unfair, but because the truth isn't there to back them up. And that fear leaks out in their body language, their hesitation, or the way they rush to change the subject. The more specific you get, the more exposed they feel, and the more obvious the lie becomes. Tone is everything. You can say the same words in two different tones and get two completely different reactions. A liar knows this, and they're banking on your tone betraying you. They want you to get angry, to sound offended, to raise your voice, or let sarcasm drip into your words, because the moment you do, they have an opening. They can twist your emotion into the story. They can say you're being irrational, that you're blowing things out of proportion, that they can't have a real conversation with you because of the way you're speaking. But when your tone stays neutral, calm, steady, and even, that weapon gets taken out of their hands. Neutral tone is disarming because it doesn't match what the liar expects. They've rehearsed in their head how you might respond. They're prepared for defensiveness, for denial, for fire. What they're not prepared for is composure. When you hold your voice in a balanced, almost casual state, you remove the friction they want to play off of. Instead of being able to say, "See, you're overreacting," they're left with nothing to grab. And that nothing is powerful because it shifts the burden back onto them. It's not easy, though. Keeping a neutral tone when you know you're being lied to goes against instinct. Instinct says to fight back, to raise your voice, to show that you see what's happening. But every sharp edge in your tone becomes a tool for them to use. That's why neutral tone is such a trick. It feels like you're doing less, but you're actually doing more. You're holding the ground. You're keeping the focus on their words, not your reaction. And when the attention stays on their words, that's where lies start to break. Think about what happens when someone is telling the truth and they're met with a neutral response. They don't feel threatened by it because they don't need your tone to validate them. Their truth stands. But a liar, when they're met with calm neutrality, feels this silence between words grow louder. They can't figure out if you're believing them or if you're testing them. They don't know what you're thinking, and that uncertainty makes them restless. They want you to reveal your stance through tone. When you don't, they're left guessing, and guessing makes them nervous. Nervous liars talk too much, repeat themselves, and slip. The neutral tone also signals something deeper. It signals control. It says, "I'm not playing your game. I'm not stepping into the role you want me to play," because a liar thrives when they can script your reaction. If they lie and you explode, they already know how to flip that. If they lie and you panic, they already know how to use that. But when your tone stays level, they have no script to follow. They're forced to carry the full weight of the story without the emotional distraction they were counting on. And that's why a neutral tone doesn't just protect you, it dismantles them piece by piece. The difference between truth and lies is endurance. The truth doesn't need protection. It doesn't need rehearsing. It doesn't need patching. It doesn't need to be dressed up to look convincing. Truth stands on its own because it's rooted in reality, and reality doesn't shift just because someone questions it. If you ask a truthful person to tell their story once, twice, or 10 times, the details will stay the same. Maybe they'll change the wording, maybe they'll emphasize different parts depending on how they feel, but the bones of the story will never change because those bones are real. A lie, on the other hand, can't handle repetition. It gets weaker every time it's retold. It bends, it cracks, it collapses because it has nothing solid underneath to hold it up. That's why liars hate being asked to go over something again. It's why they get frustrated when you ask for clarity. They know their story isn't built to last. Every retelling is another chance for them to trip over their own invention, to contradict what they said earlier, to forget which detail they made up last time. The truth doesn't work that way. It stands. It doesn't care how many times it's questioned because it doesn't have to be managed. It simply exists. A lie is fragile because it has to be maintained, and maintenance takes energy. The longer a liar talks, the more energy it costs, and eventually they run out of energy to keep the story straight. You can see this play out in how people behave when they're pressed. Someone telling the truth stays steady. They don't mind explaining. They don't mind going over the timeline because they know what happened. They might get tired of repeating themselves, but the facts don't change. A liar, though, starts showing the cracks. They add details that don't fit, or they strip details away hoping you won't notice the gaps. Their story shifts shape because it's not anchored to reality. It's anchored to whatever they think you want to hear in the moment, and anchors like that don't hold. The collapse of a lie doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes it's slow, piece by piece. A detail today that doesn't line up with a detail tomorrow. A phrase they used before that slips out differently later. Each small inconsistency piles up until the structure of the story is too heavy to hold itself together. And when that happens, the liar is exposed not by confrontation, but by their own words. Their collapse is built into the very thing they created. This is why patience matters. Lies can look strong in the short term, but time is the enemy of falsehood. Time doesn't erode truth, it clarifies it. Time erodes lies because the longer they're tested, the more obvious it becomes that they don't fit. A liar can talk fast and get away with something in the moment, but stretch it out, ask them again later, let the story live in daylight, and it starts to fall apart under its own weight. Truth doesn't just stand up, it outlasts. Lies don't just weaken, they eventually collapse under the pressure they can't carry. Every interaction carries a balance of power, even if it's subtle. When someone lies to you, what they're really trying to do is take control of that balance. They want to push you into defense, to make you question yourself, to scramble for explanations while they stand tall behind the shield of their story. In those moments, the liar feels like they hold the upper hand because they've set the terms of the exchange. They spoke first, they threw out the narrative, and now they're waiting for you to react to it. But the power doesn't stay with them unless you give it to them. The moment you stop defending and start observing, the balance shifts. This shift isn't loud. It doesn't come from calling them out or slamming down evidence or trying to trap them with clever words. It comes from something quieter, control of yourself. When you don't take the bait, when you don't rush to correct or explain, the liar loses their grip. They can't pull you into their frame because you've chosen not to step into it. That's the real power shift. It's not about controlling them, it's about refusing to let them control you. A liar thrives when they set the pace. They talk fast, they stack words, they try to overwhelm you so you'll trip over your own reaction. But when you slow down, when you ask questions calmly, when you hold eye contact without flinching, the pace changes. Suddenly, they're the ones scrambling to keep up. You're no longer chasing their story, they're tripping over their own attempt to keep it alive. And the more they stumble, the more obvious it becomes that they're not leading the conversation anymore. Power in these moments comes from posture, tone, and patience. It's the quiet strength of not needing to prove yourself right away. It's the calm voice that says, I can wait while you explain. It's the stillness in your body that shows you're not unsettled by their words. Liars notice those things. They expect you to be animated, defensive, desperate to clear your name or poke holes in theirs. When you're not, they lose the advantage they thought they had. And without that advantage, the pressure flips back onto them. This shift doesn't just protect you, it unsettles them, because liars don't want the spotlight on their own story. They want the spotlight on your reaction. When you take that away, the only thing left to examine is what they said. Every sentence they speak is now carrying the weight of proof, and the more they try to hold it, the heavier it gets. They're the ones sweating under the silence, fumbling for consistency, stretching their story until it starts to tear. That's what a power shift looks like. It's not a fight you win with louder words. It's a quiet move where you stop being the hunted and start becoming the observer. When people think about dealing with liars, they often picture a dramatic moment of exposure, catching someone red-handed, cornering them until they have no choice but to admit the truth. That sounds satisfying, but in reality, it's not what matters most. The real goal isn't about catching a liar. It's about protecting yourself from the damage their lies can cause. Because every lie is a trap, and the more you engage with it on their terms, the more tangled you become. Protecting yourself means refusing to get pulled into that trap, keeping your clarity and your peace instead of chasing their confession. The truth is, you might never get a liar to admit they lied. Some people will twist themselves in circles forever rather than own up to what they've done. If your sense of power depends on forcing them to admit it, you'll always feel stuck. But when your focus shifts to protecting yourself, the need for their confession fades. You don't need them to say, I lied. For you to step back, create distance, and move in a way that keeps you safe from their manipulation. That's the difference between catching and protecting. Catching is about them. Protecting is about you. Protecting yourself begins with clarity. You stop letting their words dictate your emotions and start asking, what do I know to be true for me? A liar wants you off balance, doubting your instincts, second-guessing what you saw or felt. Protection means trusting those instincts without waiting for their validation. If something feels off, if the story keeps shifting, if your gut tells you there's a gap, that's enough for you to step carefully. You don't need to prove it to them. You don't need them to agree. Clarity is your shield, and you hold it by trusting what you know. It also means setting boundaries. Protecting yourself might look like limiting how much you share, refusing to give them more ammunition to twist, or simply stepping back from the interaction altogether. It's not about creating a dramatic confrontation. It's about recognizing that not everyone deserves access to your energy. A layer doesn't just take trust. They take time, focus, and peace of mind. Protection is choosing not to give those away. When you shift from catching to protecting, you start to see lies differently. Instead of thinking, how do I prove you wrong? You think, how do I make sure your words don't control me? That mindset puts you back in control. It takes the power away from them and puts it back where it belongs, with you. Because the reality is, a liar will often dig their own hole without your help. They'll contradict themselves, expose themselves, and collapse under the weight of their story. But you don't have to wait around for that collapse. You don't have to play the game of catching them in the act. You only have to protect yourself by not letting their lies take root in your life. At the end of the day, liars only win when you play their game. They need your reaction, your energy, your defenses, because that's the fuel that keeps their story alive. But when you stay calm, when you use silence, when you lean into curiosity and let the weight of their own words do the heavy lifting, everything changes. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to catch them. You don't have to drag the truth out of someone who refuses to give it. You just protect yourself, and in that protection, you take back the power they were trying to steal. Liars hate this because it works. It leaves them exposed, it leaves them unsettled, and it leaves you standing exactly where you should be, in control of yourself, unshaken and untouchable.